Hi everyone, my name's Nikki and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing some drawing and I was inspired by plants and my ideas for my May bullet journal spread. As you've probably seen, I did 3 different spread ideas, one of them which was minimalistic, the other one which was a circus theme, and finally the plants theme. I ended up going for the circus theme, however I did feel very inspired by drawing all of the plants and obviously by my plant babies in the back over here. I drew a lot of different kinds in different groupings, different styles, so I thought that I'd just share my process with you. You can watch me, see how I drew them, and then I'll just be talking through how I did them, my ideas and inspirations. Don't forget, if you enjoy things like drawing, doodling, bullet journaling, you can follow my bullet journal Instagram, which is @expressivejournal, and also my main Instagram, which is _llamazacool_, where I post almost daily regular updates, and also you can see things like these little drawings there on my bullet journal Instagram. To begin, I started by drawing 3 separate plants in pots, and the first one is the one on the top left, and this is my ZZ plant. It is inspired by the one that I own and have in my room and sometimes in the background of my videos. But anyway, to begin with these plants, I start by drawing out the plant pot, because this is the main base and the area from where the plant sprouts. Once you have the base, you can then work around with the positionings. I used my unpin fine liner in black, I believe 0.1mm, and basically use that to create the rim of the pot, add some extra detailing, like as you can see, trying to curve it around, make it look a little bit more circular. Then of course I drew the line drawings for the plant and the leaves itself. After that, I used this Crayola super tip and my Tombow blending brush pen. Then I used a little coaster as a palette, scribbled on it with the Crayola super tip, and then used the blending brush pen, dipped it into the ink, and then used that to color in. And this gives the pigment a lovely watercolor effect. It looks so nice and you can really work with detailing and layering. After that, I then moved on to the Monstera, which is next to it, and this is in a slightly more tall pot without that much detail. And then I started drawing the stems and the leaves. I really love this plant and I actually got my own recently. I love how the juvenile leaves have less holes in them. However, as they mature, they begin to gain those holes and you can really tell the Monstera's age. I started to basically draw the basic outlines, and then after that, doing details like the holes and then the veins of the plant. After that, it was just mainly working around it and trying to add some extra line detailing, but for this I mainly add the detail when it comes to the color. After that, I'm just adding a little bit of darkness to the inside of the pot and shading with some Tombow brush pens in light grey, nice warm grey, and then I decided to add some stripes so the pot wasn't that blank and bland, and it had a little bit of decoration so the pots weren't all continuous plain white. I think adding little details like that are very simplistic but can make the difference when you need to add that variation. Then I moved back to a unipin fine liner in black just to add those sketch lines and make the pot look a lot more rounded, give it that illusion, and I love how this looks. I also use a slightly different Tombow brush pen, this one was slightly darker grey, to add in that extra detailing too. After that, I moved on to the same technique with the blending brush and the Crayola super tips, however I focused the pigment around the veins and the center of the plant. As soon as you add the pigment and the ink onto the blending brush pen, it is incredibly pigmented. As you can see, the color comes off very bright. However, as you start to use it, then it becomes a little bit more pastelized and look a lot more watercolor-like. I use this so I can focus on certain areas, have areas of darkness or areas that are more highly pigmented, and I can create the effect of shadowing, but also different colorations in leaves, because sometimes some leaves have more yellow tones, they have some darker tones, and you can really see like all the color differences in there. So I had fun playing around with that and really working with using the blending brush pen, trying to figure it out. And I definitely recommend that you try this out because you can use absolutely any pen ink with it, not just Tombow. After that, I'm moving on to a cactus, and this is very reminiscent of the one that I did in my bullet journal ideas for May video, because I did 3 themes, one for circus, one for plants, and one for a minimalistic theme. I drew this in a little grouping and basically I tried to recreate that. It's a simple generic looking cactus with a couple prickles and spikes, as you can see me drawing here. It was very simplistic and mainly a lot of line work, and what I did, I just drew little star shapes or little 3 spikes in regular intervals, and then I colored it in, filled in the blank spaces with that green. However, I worked on adding shading with that slightly darker green in the areas where one piece of the cactus covers another, always imagining, because you can see from the 3 pots that there's one area of light where the light hits the plant and one area of darkness, trying to keep it consistent there. Not to forget, I also played around with the design of the pot, so I filled this one in a light grey, and then I added the different colorations and also the shadowing with the black unipin fine liner, but also slightly darker darker tombow brush pen. Moving on, we're doing something slightly different, and here are some hanging plants. So this one is a little vining and draping plant, and I was mainly inspired by something like the golden pothos plant. So I used a color combination of yellows and greens for this, and the designs are so much more simple than the three that I just showed you, and it's very easy to replicate in my opinion. So I drew a basic round pot on these 3 strings hanging up from the same area, and then I drew some vines with more teardrop and some heart-shaped leaves. Then I drew some of them and colored them in with a more yellow toned Crayola super tip with the blending brush, and then some with more green tones, and then laid them on top. The next one looks something like a Huorthia or an aloe, I'm not sure, it's not a replica of a specific plant, but I designed the pot with a little bit more detail. Half of it's white, half of it's grey, it's quite interesting. And then finally, this one here is a string of pearls. I do have a few, so this is inspired by some of the ones that I do have. I colored in the pot a normal grey, and then just added and dotted some of the green onto the pearls themselves, draping very nicely. Now we're going to be moving on to something pretty exciting, and it is for the plant groupings. So I'm focusing on this grouping at the bottom left of the page here, and it is a mixture of a pilea, also 2 different types of cacti. I'm drawing the biggest one first, and then sketching out and drawing out the shape of the pot. Once you've got the pot sorted, then you can start developing the plant. I'm doing all of the line work first, and then I'll be moving on to coloring them, and you can see it's very simplistic, looking very 2D as well. Not that much detail, but we will be adding in the detail with the shading, and the shading is the key. For the main pot, I'm keeping that one white, however, coloring it in and shading it with unipin fine liner and also some grey tombow brush pens. Then I'm coloring in the cactus. This is a prickly pear or a bunny ear cactus. I'm using a more flat color, just the basic green, however then adding some more pigmented green in areas of more darkness and shading. Then I basically did the same thing for this tiny little cactus at the bottom in the middle, added some pink for the flower at the top, and then the pilea, I mainly focused on trying to get the coloration right, just like any normal pilea would be. I also added a couple of babies at the bottom just to make it look a little less sparse. Now moving on to the next one, I was inspired by some of my own plants. This one here is an Qaeda Poly, another plant that I really do love, and I actually have 2 of, so I was inspired by those and mainly used them for reference. I drew the outlines, which were quite interesting because there is no proper definite shape, and the edges are quite wavy, not straight. They have white veining down the center, so that was quite interesting to do. With this one, I added a lot more color and unconventional colors, so it's not flat green. And I think that when drawing little plant landscapes, you need to focus about how can I add extra color, how can I make it look different, because using the same type of green over and over again can get quite repetitive. So with this, you'll see in a moment what I mean by adding that extra color. I also added a little pot with 2 cacti at the left, and then on the right I did a variation of that hanging trailing pothos, but I added some more heart-shaped leaves instead of teardrops, just playing around with the leaf shape and different types of plants. With this, the pots were slightly darker, so I added more shading with a grey tombow brush pen, and also not to forget the unipin fine liners as usual. I colored in the cacti and the pothos, just basic green colors, a little bit of pink on the cacti, and then this huge mix of colors for the Qaeda Poly because it has very dark, rich green leaves, and at the underside of the leaves they're actually more of a red tone as well. So I tried to incorporate that into them as well, using a lot darker colors, some browns in there as well, and then coloring in the stems with more of a red tone, just like they would be in real life. And I think that makes it pop a little bit more. The different color variations is incredibly fun to play around with, but also lifts it up off the page and makes it look a little bit more interesting so it's not repetitive. If you love plants, just like I do because I absolutely adore them, please do vote in the poll if you'd like to see something like a plant tour, because I'd be more than happy to do one of those, as I have quite a lot of house plants that I absolutely love. Next, I focused on doing some more hanging plants, and these are in terrariums. I don't have any terrariums at the minute, but I'm looking to make one. I did this teardrop shaped one first, and this has a little air plant inside. I recently got some air plants and I'm absolutely loving them. I also drew some dots and some little rocks and circles, then colored in the air plant with some green, and then for the rocky areas, I used some yellows and browns just to add that little like stone rocky pebble stuff at the bottom that the air plant will sit on. Then for extra shading, I used a tombow brush pen in a light grey and just added that around the edge. Again, all of the light is hitting from the same point in all of these pots. Just imagine a lamp bulb and then where the shadows would hit from where the lamp is. Then for the next terrarium, this one is more triangular and I put a little succulent in here using the same techniques, however this time some more grey colours mixed in with the neutrals for the rocks at the bottom. Then the final one here in the bottom left, it's a slightly different terrarium. It's more like like a dome over a little tray, and the tray is more wooden. I used a unipin fine liner just to add some wood details in there, then also colored in the cactus and used that tombow brush pen to add some extra shading on the dome. Plus, because it's more rounded, I tried to use my fine liner to add some lines to make it look more rounded. Now that I'm done for main groupings of plants, I decided to have a go drawing some standalone leaves, and the first one is from a maidenhair fern. I basically drew the whole leaf pattern, and I used to have one of these, and I really love how dainty and cute the leaves were. So anyway, after that I moved on to this Monstera here and started drawing out the leaves. I began with drawing out the leaf shapes, and I really enjoyed doing this because you can be very creative with them and really let loose. The leaves closer towards the bottom are in the juvenile stages of life. They'll have less holes in them. However, the ones closer to the top should be more mature, larger with more holes. And anyway, the maidenhair fern has very light green leaves, incredibly pretty, and I absolutely love how they look, but I always struggle with looking after ferns because I don't think I have enough humidity in my room or house. The Monstera, I basically covered it with a pretty much flat green color. However, around some areas, especially around the holes you can see there and closer to the edges, certain areas such as veining, I added some darker colors so you can see, make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, add some extra tones in there so it's not just flat green. I really enjoyed doing this, and I think that it was so fun to play around with. Then with this light gray unipin fine liner, I just darkened some edges that are closer to you. So for example, if something's close to you, I'll darken those lines. However, stuff that's more far away, I'll leave the lines thinner. It creates more perspective and works really well. To fill in some more space, I decided to draw this leaf in the center. It's from a very mature Monstera plant, and I absolutely love how this looks. For the veining, I actually used my unipin fine liner instead of actually doing the different colors with the Crayola Super Tips and the blending brush. So as you can see here, I'm mainly focusing around the edges, the outside, and the holes, trying to get that all sorted, and then doing the veining so you can see it's more pigmented there in comparison to when I'm going to fill it in. Since this had a much larger surface area, I found it a little bit more difficult to keep the color flat and even, but I had a good time regardless and enjoyed playing around with the different tones. I also used this Uniball white pen just to fix up the edges and add some lighter touches here and there where it needs to be, or like accidentally went over the lines. Then I did the same thing with darkening the lines that are closer towards you and leaving the lines further back thinner. And that's it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed this. I really enjoyed filming this. I think that it was so fun, and I absolutely love plants. Being able to draw them and unleash that creativity was a great experience. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget that you can subscribe and press the bell to receive notifications when I post a new video, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Bye!